If you thought that I was gonna open this review by singing a Spice Girls song, well, you'd be wrong. Ah, who am I kidding? If you wanna be my lover, you gotta get with my friends. Make it last forever. Friendship never ends. Let me tell you what I want, what I really want. What I really want is an awesome episode of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Golden Wind, and that's exactly what we get in this episode when Trish finally reveals her stand for the first time in the series, and it's called the Spice Girl. If there's one thing that can be said for the creator of the JoJo series, it's that he had an eclectic taste in music. Everything from rock and rap, progressive rock, jazz, and now British pop bands. That being said, this was a very solid, intense episode which was breakneck and had a fantastic ending, and it all followed the character of Trish, which was really refreshing considering that for the most part she's been a background character for basically the entire series. Now that she has a stand, she's finally going to be able to defend herself, and her stand, the Spice Girl, is unique if anything. It's called the Spice Girl. It looks a lot like King Crimson, but it actually doesn't have the same abilities. In fact, it's unlike any ability that we've seen thus far in the series. It has the ability to make things soft. And while that might seem kind of boring and maybe even not all that useful, the way that Trish actually uses it in this episode is pretty surprising. Actually, it's not so much Trish that uses it as it is the Spice Girl stand itself. Unlike a lot of the other stands in the series, this one seems to have its very own consciousness and seems to work independently of its user, which is really useful because Trish has no idea what the hell is going on through most of this episode as she's desperately trying to run away from Notorious B.I.G., which, by the end of this episode, you pretty much realize is an invincible stand. I honestly don't know how anyone would be able to actually kill this thing, as no matter how much you attack it, no matter how much you tear it apart, it just manages to regenerate and come back for more. It's the Terminator of stands, and it made this episode all the more awesome. The story in this episode of JoJo follows Trish as she's desperately trying to run away from Notorious B.I.G. when suddenly, out of nowhere, we get to see that her stand manifests for the very first time, communicating with her and telling her that she needs to rely on her abilities, trying to get Trish to escape and run away to the closet of the plane, where she actually starts to transform all of the objects around them into soft material, which basically causes Notorious B.I.G. to just sort of run into things, get stuck, and sort of just like stretch around all over the place. They eventually trap it in the closet, and that's when Spice Girl decides to destroy it with a giant metal rod. When they try to go back to the cockpit, suddenly we learn that Notorious B.I.G. has actually gotten into the engines of the airplane and has suddenly transformed and multiplied into a giant, more monstrous version of itself. Trish runs into the cockpit with all of the other characters, and that's when one of the craziest scenes in all of JoJo takes place, where she actually uses her ability to transform the cockpit into a makeshift parachute, and the plane gets stuck to Notorious B.I.G., which suddenly just explodes into the ocean, and suddenly that stand becomes legendary. They're not able to defeat it, but because the ocean has so many crashing waves and it's constantly moving, it's just going to chase them until the end of time. The episode actually makes it clear that it goes down as like this legendary creature which takes out ships occasionally, but I wonder if this is actually the end we're actually going to see of Notorious B.I.G. I would actually like to see it return, if only to see if there is someone who could potentially destroy this thing, but like I said, I really don't think it's possible. This episode right here fully proved, however, that Trish has got the skills to pay the bills. She's finally going to be able to fight along with Bruno and his boys, and that alone is pretty damned exciting. It's also confirmed that the brooch that belonged to Giorno is transforming into his brand new hand, which is going to allow him to heal, as well as healing Narancia and Mista. In fact, there's a shot at the end of the episode where all the characters get into that ridiculous JoJo pose. It's really great to see all of them together and being super confident. The episode ends ominously as the boss and King Crimson deduce that Bruno and his gang are heading to Sardinia, and he has this picture of his wife, and if he realizes if they go to where this picture was taken, Abbacchio is going to be able to use Moody Blues to go back in time and figure out who took the picture, and it looks like that's none other than the boss himself. They're this much closer to learning his identity, but I don't think it's gonna go down that easily. So what's the rundown on this episode of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Golden Wind? To say that this episode wasn't kitschy and fun would be an understatement. I mean, just the fact that Trish has a stand that's called Spice Girl is absolutely hilarious. Even when she goes on the attack, she says wannabe over and over and over. It's pretty obvious the creator of the series was something of a fan of Spice Girls, and if you grew up like me in the 90s, you couldn't avoid them. They were all over the place and they were super popular. I just didn't expect that it would end up being the name of a stand. Then again, I didn't think that they were going to fight against a giant blob creature called Notorious B.I.G., so there you go, JoJo subverting my expectations yet again. Most of this episode was a game of cat and mouse as Trish was making her way around the plane and trying to distract Notorious B.I.G. by lifting up and raising chairs and then eventually seeing her stand for the first time, which has a really cool and super confident personality. And while her stand might seem kind of useless in terms of its abilities, it was used to amazing effect in this episode and made for a lot of really great animated moments. Really, it's just great to finally see her have a lot of confidence, especially at the end of the episode when she just made a mad dash for the cockpit. You can tell that she really impressed Bruno Bucciarati in this episode, who was also really awesome as he helped out Abbacchio, who was almost taken over by Notorious B.I.G. as well, utilizing sticky fingers. But the actual shot of them turning the cockpit into a parachute and flying over the ocean as this thing just crashed in is just an image which will always be burned into my mind. This was a really solid episode for Trish, and I'm really excited to see what she's going to do for the rest of the series. I can't wait to see more of the Spice Girl. So, I loved this episode, as insane and crazy as it is, but isn't that the reason we like JoJo in the first place? I'm giving this episode a solid 5 out of 5. Yes, it was that good of an episode, and you should definitely be checking it out if you're following the series. You got my thoughts on the episode, but I want to get yours. Tell me what you thought about this episode in the comments section below. Are you impressed by Trish's brand new stand, the Spice Girl? Did you have a favorite scene from this episode? Did you not like something about this episode? Do you think they're actually going to be able to make it to Sardinia and find out the identity of the boss? Let's just get a discussion going about this episode in the comments section below. Thank you all for watching this review. Make sure to check out my channel for tons of other anime reviews. We're also getting back to our podcast series, The Powerful Nerdcast. Make sure to check that out on the channel. We just released our 87th episode where we talk about all things from anime to video games and movies. So make sure to check that out. I will see all of you guys next time, and as always, stay down there, baby.